Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I am also a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to go over a topic that a couple of y'all requested, limerence, right? Why are some people so addictive? Why are some people so magnetic? Why do we get infatuated by certain people, even if we do not love them necessarily? Let's talk about it. The research is in the description box. Some of the research that I use, or maybe a lot of them, is not necessarily accessible to everybody. Remember, y'all, I'm a student, okay? I'm a doctoral student, so I have access to this, but I'm going to try and detail a lot of this information in general so that you guys have some access by means of me, right? The vehicle of information that I can give you. So today, let's define it. Then we're going to talk about the feelings of that. And then we're going to talk about how this occurs. And we're going to talk about all of that supported by research, okay? Limerence in general, from what we understand, is a very intense, obsessive form of infatuation. And it actually makes particular people, the person, the object of your affection, seem very attractive, very magnetic, almost unattainable. And in 1979, the psychologist that coined this term, actually, she wrote a book. She was kind of trying to understand limerence and love, the experience of being love. Is it the same as love? Is it different than love? And as this research has progressed, we've learned from what I understand, it's different than love. And I think everyone also has a different perspective of love. Me particularly, I think love is more of an action rather than a feeling. Limerence is not really much about action at all. So that makes it very different from love, my understanding of love, okay? And so what is this experience? What does it feel like? Typically, it's almost like a repetitive, intrusive, involuntary thought or thinking about the object of your affection. Let's call it a romantic interest, this particular romantic interest. You might be thinking about this person quite a lot to the point where it's maybe interrupting some of the things that you are dealing with or doing, right? When you're in a romantic relationship and you love somebody, you're not necessarily thinking about them all the time or daydreaming about them before bed or thinking about them all the time when you're driving from work or to and from work. You're not thinking about things of that sort because it's just something that you feel is safe in your life. It's not something that's fleeting or going to go away, or you're clawing for that affection, right? And so limerence is a very almost intrusive, involuntary type of thought. You could even enjoy the feeling of it, but you're not necessarily in control of it to that extent, at least not directly, okay? The next one is you actually have some sort of emotional dependence on the reciprocation. Better might even say is the signs of reciprocation. You might even be hyper-focused on the reciprocation in and of itself, trying to figure out, is this person reciprocating? You're almost trying to pay attention more if there's any sort of reciprocation. And if there is, you have emotional highs. And if there isn't, you may have some lows. And so you're very speculative on if this person is interested in you or not. You're fixated to some extent, okay? The next one is, and you might not realize this is what occurs, but you have some sort of ideal perspective of this person, almost a sense of putting them on a pedestal, okay? You perceive them as something that they are not necessarily. You have a story behind them. You've added meaning to them without knowing fully who they are. You've idealized them, okay? That's one symptom that's really common. And this tends to happen because you actually don't know them. And so your mind is filling in those blanks, okay? The next one is you might have an acute longing for this person to the point where it can actually be disruptive of your day-to-day tasks. We were mentioning like you're driving back home from work or to and from work, whatever it is, but it could also be disruptive, like it gets in the way of you doing your actual work task. If it's a coworker, you might be thinking about them all the time during your work shift, you're longing for them, and you might actually disrupt your own work schedule to try and see if you can talk to them and kind of reduce this longing, okay? The next one is that fear of rejection. You are afraid to be rejected by them. Maybe you have been rejected multiple times by them, and maybe they have you like in an off and on type of situation. So you're never fully able to attain them, but they're also not fully cut off from you. There's a sort of like a limbo situation. So you're continuously feeling that rejection, and that fear of rejection continues, okay? The next one is you have this intense emotional attachment based on the ambiguous cues. Remember, we were talking about emotional dependence on the signs of reciprocation. This is very similar, but it's not about the reciprocation portion. It's about the parts that you don't know if it's reciprocated or not, okay? So this one is similar, but this is more about the cues that you're not sure, is it rejection or is it not rejection, right? The first one we were talking about, or the second point that we brought up, is you're looking for reciprocation. Do they like me? Do they not? And you have very much highs on that. This one is different. Let's say the object of your interest, romantic interest is the word that we were going to use today. They said, hey, let's do a movie night together. It's ambiguous. Is it a date? Is it friendship? What is it? And so you might have intense highs and lows throughout that movie night, or prior to it, or even after it. And you're trying to really break up what's really going on with this particular case. And you're having a lot of intense feelings based on that, okay? So I do want to mention, this is not a clinical diagnosis, okay? This is not something that we as therapists evaluate and we put in your medical file and we bill it for insurance, or you get a super bill and you give it to your insurance. None of that, okay? This is not a clinical diagnosis, but this is a phenomenon from what humans experience. And so that's why we're talking about this today. So what causes this form of intense attraction? Again, supported by research, okay? So basically, a lot of it is actually that reward system in your brain. I'm not going to go too in depth because I try to make my videos as palatable as possible, because I know I can talk a little complicated, and that's on me, okay? So basically, when we see those, let's call it like MRI studies, okay? We don't even need to call it that, okay? When we look at your brain, when you're studying romantic love or infatuation or things of that sort, there's a certain region, okay? It's how do I even explain it? Okay, there's a region in your brain, if you scan it, whatever it may be, that we see. Let's call it the reward center. Okay, and this reward center that we're looking at, this region, does actually react. It activates. Okay, that's the word that we kind of call it. We see that with substance. Okay, so when you're taking substance or you have a use disorder, right, that is diagnosable. There's a certain region that has increased activity or decreased activity depending on the connection or the absence of this substance, okay? Use disorders, okay? We're talking about use disorders. Very similarly, we see very similar functioning with a person's brain when they're feeling limerence, okay? This addiction towards somebody. It's the same thing, okay? Similar, okay? This research was 2005. And so typically what that means and what we can conclude is one way that causes this intense form of attraction is the fact that you feel like this person is out of reach. And so without them, you feel very low. And then with them, you feel very high. So we've talked about that before, some of the symptoms. That's what's creating that. Because remember, in general, use disorders tend to happen from a dependence of this substance. So you have a dependence on this person's approval or love or whatever it may be. And so you feel this way, okay? The next one is actually some sort of uncertainty. And there's a reinforcement of that, okay? So remember we were saying it's not that someone doesn't like you, but it's also not clear that this person does like you. Or maybe there's a barrier. Maybe you can't be together. Unfortunately, I see this a lot when somebody is married and the other person is the affair partner. The affair partner becomes very addicted to that married person because that married person is not always available. And so they're trying to earn that person's love and trust. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. A lot of times when I'm talking about things, I don't have much emotion attached to it. It's just because I'm talking about in a clinical sense. I'm not giving you my opinion. I'm trying not to, right? So I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But basically, there's unpredictable and inconsistent signs of the object of your love interest, where that creates a very strong reinforcement loop. Does that make sense? And that unfortunately is also a known mechanism for use disorders, okay? So you get them and then you don't get them. They're available, they're unavailable. They give you love, they pull away. And so you might start feeling that inconsistent pattern and that's creating that loop, okay? The next one is ideal. We've talked about it, but it's like a cognitive bias. Basically, you idealize them. It's basically, I'm trying to word it more clearly. You assign them a sense of importance that isn't necessarily reality. I don't mean that in a mean way, but you just perceive them as more important than they actually are. And that's because you're filling in the blanks of what they could be or what's possible. So you're not seeing them for who they are, and you're attached to that image or idea of them, okay? The next one is, unfortunately, this is really common, and I do feel really bad for saying this, but it's almost like a risk factor, but it also causes it. A lot of people who have a high emotional need or they're vulnerable they tend to be more susceptible to this. Research does show that individuals who are at more vulnerable times in their life, going through divorce, maybe having an unhappy marriage to which maybe they're leaning out, whatever it is, maybe you lost your, I don't know, lost a family member, you're struggling with depression, maybe you lost your job, you're more at risk for feeling this way towards somebody, okay? And the last one is some of the causes of this phenomenon is actually lack of reciprocation and clarity, right? So there's no clarity about what's going on. You don't know if they like you. You don't know if they do. And so some of these things are part of the reason this happens. I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.